Hello, hello, hello. All right. This is the way to do it. Applause before we begin. I love that. So, good morning. I'm Michelle Bird. I'm the Managing Director of the Producers Guild of America East. Yay, I'm happy to welcome you here to our 6th annual Produce By Conference. How many of you are Producers Guild members? Good. Nice showing. So for those of you who are not members, just want to let you know the Guild is a nonprofit trade organization that represents, protects, and promotes the interests of all members of the producing team in film, television, and new media. And it's now my great pleasure to introduce PGA East Chair, Kay Rothman. Thank you.
Good morning.
I'm not supposed to do this with
I
you.
know.
Okay.
Michelle has been adeptly spinning plates for a very long time to bring us to this moment. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very sweet.
She's really awesome. You need to be very nice to her. Thank you also to Vance and Susan and our staff here at PGA East and our national headquarters in LA. Thank you to our national presidents, Gail Berman and Lucy Fisher, for their leadership and their care. And to Lori McCreary and Gary Lucchese, our national president emeritus, for their continued leadership. On behalf of Bill Horberg, with whom I have the honor of serving as chairs of PGA East, welcome. Bill is filming in Berlin, doing what we're supposed to be doing, but I know he's here in spirit, and he might actually also be here through the magic of Livestream, which we are doing today. I have heard that some of our PGA East Atlanta members got up super early this morning and they're watching, and good afternoon to some of our PGA East members who are in London joining us. That's pretty amazing. Bill and I understand the power of community in our guild and in our industry. That's something that Lori works very hard on with the One Gill initiative. Today is designed to foster that fellowship in the Guild. And today, I hope you're going to find much inspiration and much opportunity for collaboration. We couldn't be here to do that without our sponsors. They are an essential part of bringing us here. Many of them are here today participating. On their badges, it'll say sponsor. Please, please, please take a minute to introduce yourself to them. Thank them for their continued support. Today's programming session, the first one, is sponsored by Delta Airlines, the official sponsor of our conference. They have been a strong sponsor of the Guild for over 6 years, and I know from your applause that many of you, like I have found them to be invaluable in the field, trying to check 17 bags of gear in a very small airport onto a plane that doesn't have 17 seats, and they help us. So we really are deeply grateful to Delta for doing what they do so that we can do what we do. Please, I encourage you to contact them with your production travel needs. And because we are a visual medium, I'm going to let Delta tell you a little bit more with their own video. It's short.
When we're born, we're more alike than we are different. Then somewhere along the way, we start to believe the more distant we are from each other, the more different we must be from each other. And it's only when we venture out into the world that we realize all the things we share. Maybe that's the power of flight. Delta isn't flying to over 300 places just to bring us together, but to show we were never that far apart in the first place.
Thank you. I'm Susan Sprung, one of the National Executive Directors and Chief Operating Officers of the Guild. We believe in really long titles. Before we get started, a quick reminder, please silence your cell phone. You guys are in for a huge treat this morning. Our first session is going to be incredible, so let's get started. It's my great pleasure to introduce our opening session. Please join me in welcoming Scott Stuber, Netflix's Vice President of Film, and Ron Howard, co-founder and chairman of Imagine Entertainment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Well, it's good to be here. When I was asked if I would do this, it was a very quick yes. First, I live here, so it's kind of nice when I can do something show busy here on the East Coast. But secondly, I've known Scott a long time. Over 2 decades. And we've worked together a good deal, and we're working together now on an adaptation of Hillbilly Elegy for Netflix. And it's been really great to reconnect with him. But when he took this Netflix job, I wasn't close enough and in contact with him to be able to call in and say, "Are you nuts?" But Brian Grazer and I both looked at each other and said, "Well, that's really exciting, and that's really tough." And he's got a lot of work ahead of him. And we had a few chances to talk, but from that point forward, he was just, frankly, he's unbelievably busy. You can get him when you need him, and you can get the answers you need, and all of those things that any producer or director wants. But he's carrying a tremendous load, which we're going to get to in a second. But first, I just kind of wanted to start off with, you're in a very unique spot. You're really at the epicenter of this transformation of our business. And look, it's exciting on a lot of levels. It's daunting on a lot of levels. We'll get into all of that. But you also sort of came up on the other side. Not just Hollywood, but sort of the big, industrial-sized Hollywood. And so I'm really interested in your perspective in terms of the transformation. But in order to really understand that, you started off in a kind of unlikely way. Let's get into that. Arizona?
Yeah, I went to Arizona. Don't say Arizona State.
Okay, no, I almost did.
It's over right now if you say that.
Cut off the S.
Yeah, exactly. We're done. I grew up in the Valley, so I grew up out in the San Fernando Valley.
I grew up in Burbank. Which part of the Valley?
Granada Hills.
Right. Okay.
And for those East Coasters, the Valley's on the other side of the mountain from the west side, and we're
really
the 818, and they refer to us as the other side of the mountain. So you're very removed. And my father ran finance at Lockheed, and our family grew up out there. So the movie business was very foreign to me, just like a kid from Iowa or from France. It was that thing over there, and my cousins would come and they would say, "Drive us over the hill," and you would either go to Universal Studios for the tour, or you would drive by the Paramount gates, and that was kind of what you knew of Hollywood, right? It was like, there it is. And so I went to school at Arizona. I was an athlete. I played sports, played baseball, and I love sports and movies. Those were kind of my passion. I got hurt, stopped playing baseball, and many of my friends were at USC. I was a pitcher, and I played first base, but mainly a pitcher. Okay. I touched my left arm because that's the arm that got hurt, so I still touch it. And when I was there, I thought about going back to USC because all of my friends were having people like Steven Spielberg and Robert Zemeckis and all these people who were alums buying and building things and doing things, and they had Avids and all these things, and we had little cameras in the desert. And I stayed because I had such great friendships there, but what was so advantageous, which I didn't know at the time, was my curriculum was so based in the history of film and literature and screenwriting. So I learned things, because most of us, our pop culture relevance in film is when you start, right? The thing you see that makes you love it, from that forward on is your perspective on narrative film, and a lot of times you don't go back. And And so the idea that I was able to study Truffaut and John Ford and all these incredible filmmakers and all these incredible films from the past, as I got into the business, gave me the strategic advantage, as well as the fact that I had screenwriting classes. So I deeply had the understanding and empathy of what it is to be alone in that room and try to figure it out and think you wrote something great and then give it to your teacher who goes, what is this, right? And which is the version of giving it to your producer or your studio. So there was a lot of muscle matter that I was able to build up that I didn't even recognize that became so imperative for how I was able to get into the business. And then I came to LA. I did this thing, which I don't know for many of you, that I'm 50, so I'm older. When I was young, the papers every day, the Variety and the Hollywood Reporter had a paper every day. How shocking is that? And on Tuesdays, the Hollywood Reporter had a production chart, and it would list every production in television and film. And my senior year of college, I would get it every Tuesday at the newsstand in Tucson, and I would write a letter to every UPM saying, hey, can I be a PA on Hillbilly Elegy or on Big or any of these movies or any of these things? And I never got one return letter. Not one like no, just never got it. So I was like, oh, this might be harder than I thought. I came to Los Angeles. Thankfully, my parents still lived in the Valley, so I was able to live somewhere. And I was a PA. I would just tell anyone I'll do anything. And I PA'd on a bunch of things for free. I finally made a little bit of money, but just not enough. And then I was complaining about it at a barbecue. And a friend of mine from college had got a job in casting for Bun and Murray, who at that time were doing The Real World, and they were really, making waves in Hollywood and doing things. And I was complaining to her, and I said, I just don't know what to do. I might end up over here. And she said, my sister works at a studio, and they have human resources departments, which at that time I didn't know was 1992 or 93. And I got my one suit and my car in the Valley with no air conditioning, so I was trying not to, sweat through my suit. And I went to every studio and gave my resume and said, I'll take any job you have in the feature film division. And took typing tests back in the day, when those things mattered still. And was lucky enough to get a job at Universal, ironically, in their marketing and PR department. And from there, I had a job every morning, which is, I think you guys might have even been there at that point. But every morning, every assistant had to cut out every article about any Universal film. So Jurassic Park or Shakespeare in Love or anything, and they would tape it and they would put it on my desk. And I had a series of publications as well. I had to then get it into the copy machine and make probably 50 copies. And I had to be to Lou Wasserman's office by 8 a.m. So a paper jam was the most frightening thing of my life at that time. I'm not kidding. Like a paper jam or someone not taping it down because they were hungover and the article got folded over because I got yelled at for the article being folded over on the copy. And I had to get to his office every day, and no other executive usually was in the building at 8 a.m., but he was there. He had an assistant who was not a warm and fuzzy human being. And I would come up and I would put it there, and some days he would be standing in the doorway and waiting for it. Most often than not, he was behind the door, and I just put it in his inbox, and I would leave and do it for months. And one day he was standing in the doorway, and I put it in the inbox, and he walked over and grabbed it. You try to run out of there as fast as you can. He was a very scary man, and an incredible man, and I'll finish the story. I was walking out, and he yelled something at me, and of course I didn't think he was speaking to me. He never spoke to me in 9 months, and then his big bellowing voice, he said, "Hey, son!" And I was like, oh God, I'm fired. I just stopped. I'm like, what? And I turned around, and I said, yes, sir. And he said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I thankfully said, you. And he said, keep showing up on time and maybe you will be. And that was it. And that was our exchange. And then to finish the story, I went on to Warner Brothers to work for Richard Donner, made my way back to Universal and as an executive, and then worked up to be the president of the studio at one point. And when I became the president, a woman named Nikki Rocco, who you know well and we know well, who ran distribution there, and the first female to run distribution, an incredible woman who had been trained under Lou in New York, so she was very tight with him. And by that time, he was chairman emeritus. And I told her the story, and I said, do you think you'd ever have lunch with me? And she told him the story. And then he had that corner table, remember, in the commissary, and he said, sure. And we would have lunches every probably 2 months, and they were really incredible for me. They're still some of the great memories of my life, because this icon who would sit and walk through things, and he was such an expert at distribution. I would say to him, you know, we'd be releasing 8 Mile, and he would say, well, what'd you do in this theater in Cleveland? And what'd you do in Dallas? And, you know, and I'd say, well, we did $8,000. No, you should have been doing $9,000 at the 2 o'clock. And he was just an incredible man, and those are really some of my favorite memories, just because of this, you know, the circular nature of the story.
Well, I remember that climb and your ability to be able to talk story and also understand the business and more than anything, get things done and get answers. So, you were clearly a rising star. And once you were on everybody's radar, it didn't seem like it was very long before, you were a major factor along the way. And because we've got so much to get to, but I'm just kind of curious, any rookie mistakes as you were sort of working your way, and gaining more and more responsibility?
Not one. No, I'm kidding. Well, you know what? It's funny. I was thinking about this morning, and I've been so lucky to have mentors, right? And it's truly one of the things we have to do better as an industry. And I worked for Richard Donner and Lauren Schuler Donner, who taught me, you work at a company that's vibrant sometime, but if the principals don't teach you anything, it really does you no value as a 23-year-old person. And they were so gracious with their time and their thought with me, and they taught me a lot. And Lauren, about producing, taught me, she did the work, she did the reading, she did all that stuff, but she said a couple things that have stuck with me forever. When you meet a director, if you're lucky enough to have a piece of material, whether you're the studio or a producer, and you get an incoming call from Richard Lovett who says Ron Howard's interested, you're excited, right? If you sit down with Ron Howard and you in the studio think the movie should go right, and he says in the first meeting it should go left, you will never go right. That filmmaker's dream is that filmmaker's dream. So as much as you want Ron Howard, because it's so great, that first meeting tells you what film the director is going to meet. And she said that, and she's been right every single time. And we all kind of want to will things into existence because we're so lucky to. But then it becomes problematic because you see a different dream, and then we're trying to jam you into a dream that's not yours. And so that was a great piece of advice. And then we were talking.
Find the same thing with writers, by the way, because I think Brian and I talk about this a lot. That
Very much so.
In all honesty, you sort of have to, you're not going to really talk a great writer into some other direction in a meaningful way.
No, and artist sees that piece of music the way they see it, and if they don't see it the way you do, then you have to either realize, okay, it's Ron Howard, maybe we should go that route, or, God, we really were going right, and he wants to go left, and let's not force this issue.
So, you rose to prominence, and you did a lot of great work at Universal, and then you became a producer. And this is a room full of producers, and you're very effective.
Share your pain, trust me.
A very effective producer. But I am very curious about that shift from being a buyer to a seller. And I'm also interested, and we'll get around to it, as to the way that relates to today's landscape.
I had been lucky enough. I was young when I got that job, and I did rise up in a nice way and had great opportunities. But I'd done it for a decade, and I found myself in my mid-30s. I'm very close with all the guys I grew up with. They're all still my best friends from college and high school, and they had moved on and had families and lives and things, and I was still single, and I was working a lot because I was determined never to not work and not do well. And I just had a couple things happen in my life where I thought, well, Mary Parent and I, who was my partner at Universal when we were running the studio, we were faced with another 5-year deal. And I had some things that I just thought, well, God, I have to jump out the plane, right? It's scary, and a lot of people couldn't understand it, right? Because when you're running a studio, people just do it until they get fired, and you stay, and I just, there was something in my head that thought, try something different. Life you cannot take for granted. I had some things happen that I recognized in my personal life with family members that you went, this is a gift. It is not it is not a right. You are lucky to have this moment in this life. And I wanted to try it, and it was a scary leap. And it was scarier than I thought, because everyone says, oh, when you leave the studio and you go be a producer, your phone doesn't ring as much. And you're like, ha, ha, that's not true. And then you'd come out of a meeting, you're like, who called? And they're like, your mom. And you're like, well, what, didn't Richard Lovett or Ron Howard call me? Nope, they didn't call you at all. And you're like, oh, okay. You know, and I always joke that it's like when you're a studio executive, you're an indoor cat. And when you're a producer, you're an outdoor cat. And it really is true. And you got to get in that alleyway and fight, right? And so, and it really honed me. It gave me more grit than I had. It gave me those things, and I enjoyed it. And you have to find the rhythm because producing's a slower rhythm, and you have to celebrate the wins and the details. The script getting better for you with those 2-hour script meetings is a giant win. For the studio, it's one of 16 things coming in, and they don't necessarily have the time to recognize the success. But it was, I loved it. I love producing. I know how painful it is and the struggle, and it really helped me, frankly, be better even again at this job. And I always wanted, learning from Dick and Lauren, I think, is frankly why I was able to be successful at a young age as a studio executive, because I understood the other side. And I think that empathy is everything in life. Everything to me is, I can't understand you until I know your narrative. And we make mistakes as human beings all the time, judging each other without knowing the other person's narrative. And so having the ability to know what it's like to be in a trailer at 2 in the morning with bad coffee and something went wrong, right? And it's not like you did it on purpose, but when that call comes and you lost 3 hours of shooting and you got another day, sitting in my home in Burbank and then yelling at you is not the way you run a studio. If you've been on the other side, I go, okay, I trust Ron and Brian. The crane broke. We got to figure it out, right? Because you're already tired. You're working 14, 16-hour days. So it's just about empathy, and so that's been a real great tool for me to understand how both businesses work.
So despite the success that you had as a producer, Netflix comes along, and it's this opportunity. And you know what fascinated you about it? What compelled you ultimately to take that kind of leap? You know,
I had.
I mean, you're doing 60 films.
Yeah,
right.
But I just said yes to 2 off camera, right? You know what was interesting? I had been lucky enough. I think also when you do leave, Peter Chern and I have had this conversation because he also left the job at Fox. And when you leave instead of get fired, people think you know something that they don't know, right? They're like, why did you do that? And so I'd been lucky enough over the years that people had approached me with those opportunities. The part of me that always felt like the only way I'd ever want to do it again, because it really wasn't something I thought I wanted to do again, was twofold. One, when we did go to Universal, as you know, having had a deal there in the 90s there, we weren't the greatest studio. You know, we were not a place that had vibrancy, and what was great with you know, Ron Meyer and Stacey Snider and Mark Platt and Mary Parent and Ali Brecker, rest her soul, and Kevin Misher and Donna Langley and all of us and Holly Barrow, we were all young and we didn't know, so we had this energy. It was like a sports team, right? It was this, let's do it. Like, okay, so we're in last place, let's do it. And I loved that feeling of accomplishment and teamwork. And so I thought if I ever did it again, it would be at a studio that's so broken and the owner knows it and the owner will let me try to fix it, because then you can actually fix the problems, the real problems. Or a brand new studio, a place that actually had real money and real vibrancy for it. And so that appeal was there with Netflix. You know, Ted Sarandos is a real lover of story, and that's such a valuable thing. And so is Reed Hastings, and to have 2 men, Reed goes to film festivals. That's such a benefit when you're running a studio, that your bosses actually love what you do, right? And it sounds crazy, but a lot of times they don't, right? Some of these companies, it's just a product to them. And so I have 2 men who really love storytelling, and that's a great thing. And so the challenge of it felt like, at this point in my life, a really good thing. Like, you know, and once again, I kind of like to get out of my comfort zone, which probably my wife doesn't love. But I like a challenge, and it's probably the athlete in me. I like okay, try, like let's go build something and try something, and you know, and it's been fun. It's been, to your point, daunting. It was, I think on day 1 I was like, oh wow, you know, this is going to be harder than I thought, but it's been everything I'd hoped it would be.
I got to second what you have to say about Ted Sarandos, because I've gotten to know him. He was very interested. He came up to me at a party one time, you know, and said, you know, Arrested Development does very well. We want to try original programming, but we're a little scared to start from scratch. maybe we could reboot Arrested Development. And that notion of his that he shared with me wound up leading to this opportunity for us to do more with him. And he was just, always so great. And I always felt like you two guys would be a fantastic fit, as I know you are.
He's a great enthusiast, and it's funny, we share friends in common. So about 4 or 5 years ago, even I met him. Someone said, "Oh, you guys should know each other." We had breakfast, and it so struck me because we were talking about original things, right? At that point, they were licensing and doing things, and he said, which I thought was so interesting, because a lot of times people want to get into film, come at it from a mechanical way, or I can do it and I can sell foreign, and it's a business model way. And he said, the one thing I would have liked to have done right now, and if you remember Wolf of Wall Street at the time had some different financing challenges and stuff, and they finally figured it out, but he said, I would have wanted to do that. And I thought, oh, that guy knows, he knows film. Like the fact that he would lean into Marty and Leo and want to try to make that his leap, and so it just struck me. So when it came back around, I thought, well, this guy's an enthusiast. He's a lover of cinema, and he's been a great friend and mentor and partner in all this.
Well, so let's talk about that slate of 60. What sort of form is it taking, and how do you manage it? And of course, everybody wants to know, how to not waste your time when they come in and pitch something. What, in terms of what corridors are you looking for?
Well, it's oddly not dissimilar to the studios we've all known when you think about when you've got a lot of different labels, like even at Sony, right? If you think of Sony, they've got Screen Gems and they've got Sony Classics and TriStar and Sony Animation, and so it's very similar in that sense. So we have an animation group that is building, that Melissa Cobb runs, and Greg Taylor, and they're building, hopefully up to about 4 or 6 animated feature films a year. We've got what we call an indie team that Lisa Nishimuro runs, with a bunch of different groupings in it, and so they're spiritually probably about 75%, 80% of their slate is like New Line, genre-based things with an efficiency of economics, knowing kind of an audience, horror, African-American stories, comedy, things like that, that kind of, you think of the history back to Roger Corman, AIP, Dimension, Screen Gems, New Line, really efficient genre-based film. And then about 25% probably Searchlight focused, like pedigreed art films with real high-end filmmakers. We're making a film with Charlie Kaufman. We had a great film last year, Private Life with Tamara Jenkins. So those kind of films. And then within that, there's even more subgroups where there's a family group that Nikita Maddox runs, which is real PG family movies. She just had a great success with this film, Tall Girl. And then Christina Rogers runs, we do a lot of Christmas movies, and now we're having her branch out because I feel like there's real opportunity in female thrillers and inspirational stories. And then Tendo runs our studio group, which would be like big Warner Brothers, big Universal, your film, Hillbilly Elegy, The Irishman, Michael Bay's film, Six Underground, Noah Baumbach's movie, Marriage Story. So there's a lot of different ways, and then Lisa and Adam Del Deo run our documentary team, so we make a lot of film, documentaries as well. So there's a lot of access points. I think sometimes one of the things I had to realize when I got there is there was a bunch of confusion in the marketplace because people didn't know how to access us. So we've tried to spend a lot of time over-communicating that so that you can find the right person. And I think one of the things I love the most about the company is every version of the company is in our building. So when you come into the lobby, it's kind of great because you see everyone.
That lobby is amazing. That's like talk about the epicenter. You
get your phone sheet cleared in like 20 minutes.
Well, by the way, we're pitching your family division Monday. Just
all right, good. There you go. But there's a vibrancy to it because. And it sounds simplistic, but I believe it. I'm a believer. I'm a half full guy. It's a dream world, right? So the fact that you can walk in and you can sell Cindy Hall in a series, and you can sell a documentary, you can sell like that there's an excitement to the opportunity of potential, and that I think is what makes great art, and it's what we all want. I think it's the hardest thing about producing is you're the believer always. And your job is to make others believe, and you can't get broken from that, and it is breaking, right? Sometimes the studio doesn't buy it, or you can't get that access to that filmmaker, that writer, but that is the core of what your job is you have to be a believer because it starts with you, right? You are the one who finds that piece of material that then says, I believe this can be great, and so I'm a huge believer in that energy.
Well, in terms of your experience now, again, this shift from through this journey that you've been on, what are there any best practices that have really held true, and are there any where you've had to tear up the playbook, and because of Netflix, because of the circumstances, because of the way you're making choices, you're doing it a different way?
No, I think it's held through since the first time we made a movie 100 years ago. I think character is everything. I think story is everything. I think I can have an alien attack, or I can have two people falling in love in a cafe, and whomever is at the center of it better be someone I recognize, right? And the one great thing I've noticed in the fact that we are global and deeply global, we have teams all over in every country marketing and selling things, so we're way more attuned to that consumer because we're with them and talking to them and understanding them is, it really is, and we don't know who is on an account. So I have no idea that 70-year-old woman in Liverpool, England is watching Riverdale or our teen comedies. I don't know who she is, so I don't have bias in marketing to her. So I don't assume she's only going to watch the Robert Redford movie, which is the way you would normally sell to someone in their 70s, as opposed to, well, God, she might love To All the Boys, who knew? So by not having that bias, what I've seen is it doesn't matter if the person at the center of the story is a man or a woman. It doesn't matter the color of their skin. It matters that they are human. And human condition is we all see ourselves in that person. We all want love. We all hate indignity. We all strive for greatness. We all want to beat the bad guy. Like, if that human story is us, the collective us, that movie has innate potential. And I think that is, if you are developing things, you better make sure that person leading you through that thing is something that we all find inside of us, because we're all the same inside.
Well, part and parcel to that, what about sort of, big data and versus observed research or instinctual reaction to material and so forth? Again, in terms of the sales process and the buying process at Netflix.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking for, in a good way, we don't get, we do look for everything, right? So that's also somewhat overwhelming. But you do find that there's certain narratives that are working just like the theater. It's the same business, right? It is, we live very modern now as human beings because of the phone, right? Because we all have so much access to information. So the modernity of information is relevant. So modern storytelling has value because we see ourselves in it, right? When you go to the past, because you're so deeply global, you got to be really thoughtful about a period movie and what in it is modern, right? If it's a battle between two blacksmiths in 1806 over like an iron ore, I don't know if that's really going to travel, right? I don't know if that's going to be the most global movie. So then if it isn't, then what is it in it that I recognize in today's standards? It is a family thing. Is it a love story between upstairs, downstairs? What is the thing that is still relevant today, which a lot of those themes are. Right. You just have to pull from it. So it just makes it a little more challenging, and period, that you're being smart about that 19 and 50-year-olds right now can see the parallel storytelling.
We talked a little bit about just producers and how, it's elusive, it's a little mysterious. Nobody quite can describe what producers do. I liked your indoor cat, outdoor cat analogy. But, are you seeing a pattern? Is there something that producers coming in need to know? Is there something that they're either misunderstanding about Netflix that would be helpful to this crowd?
Yeah, I mean, what for us, what we really want to do is we want to buy to make, right? And you're never going to be one-to-one on that. So, but I really challenge the teams. And the good thing is that the teams have buying power. So I don't want a line of 20 people out my door saying, can we do this? Can we do that? It's like, no, you have, and it's the way I was able to do it when I was young, right? Like Stacy and Mark said, go make 4 or 5 movies, lay yourself on the track, and if they're good, you're going to get promoted, and if they're not, you're going to go, right? And the athlete in me wants that. Like, give me the ball. I don't want you to take the shot. I want to take the shot and have the determination to do it. So we really want to be strategic in it. So I don't want the development system where you have 5 slots 30 producers, you buy 250 projects for 5 slots, because then producerially, you're in the room with the writer doing all the things you need to do. Then we're just giving notes and going back and forth, but there's not really a path, right? So in order to do that, when you come in, I need a better path than normal. Pitches, I don't really believe in, frankly, except for comedy. I've been doing this for a long time. The success rate from pitch to movie is pretty small. But in comedy, if you have a comedian attached, Will Ferrell tends to do the ideas that he loves. Melissa McCarthy tends to do the ideas she loves. Kevin Hart tends to do the idea. So that helps. If it's a generic comedy thing, if it's the greatest idea, maybe, but for the most part, probably no. A drama or a thriller, no, on a pitch, because it's execution-based, right? Go do the work, because what we want to do is buy it to make it. I don't want to buy it to develop it, right? So books, hugely valuable, right? We're a company that has no library, no IP. We just started, so anything Hillbilly Elegy is a giant opportunity for me and us as a company. And really having a point of view. Coming in without, hey, I just like this is probably not going to work. You kind of have to do the work and really work it. And even in the book, if it's great and it's a spec sale, great. But if you have something that's been around, I have this book, and I have, Susanna Grant wants to adapt it, right? So okay, I know, I give it a point of view instead of just, hey, I have this book.
And you spoke about sort of global production and so forth. Are you doing a lot of local language productions and movies, and do they come under your auspices?
Yeah. We're David Cossey, who's an executive who we worked with back at Universal. He's started the group out of London, and I've been there 2 years. The first year we had a great film on Body on Soul that got nominated, and then we had a film Angelina Jolie had directed. And then last year, obviously, we had great success with Roma. And we sub and dub all of our stuff so well globally that I've seen the opportunity that these stories can travel, right? And so we have a lot of different teams around the world in every country. So we have a group that will buy a movie in German for Germany. So that's one group, right? And it's for Germany. David's team, which we're building out in London, is to make a film in German for at least Europe, right? And so not dissimilar to what we had to build, right? When we started, we had nothing. And so that's a daunting task. We have no library. I can't remake anything. I can't remake Cocoon as much as I'd like to. I have no IP, so I can't make Jurassic Park, I can't make Avengers, I can't do any of that. So your IP ability is filmmakers and movie stars, right? And things that we know and love. Ron Howard, Martin Scorsese, Will Smith, things that you go, okay, those people have brought me joy. I know they're good, they're sophisticated. So the same applies over there. So how do we give Penelope Cruz a chance to be what we know is an incredible actress in a big Spanish film and let her just tear it apart, which she will, right? How do we find those narratives? And you and I, having done this for a long time, I noticed there's so many times we scour when you're running a studio or producer, you're looking for these great narrative storytellers around the world, and many times we bring them here, and they're great in their own language and their own system, right? The Italian system is different than ours, and yet we bring he or she to our system and kind of force them into it, and sometimes it just doesn't work for that artist spiritually, and then we're like, well, gosh, that doesn't make sense. But in their own language, if we can let them sing, and that's what I want us to do. Like Florian von Donnersmarck, who I think is just an incredible filmmaker, who, I'll give you a quick aside story on him. Do you guys all know who he is? Lives of Others, which won the Academy Award, and an incredible German filmmaker. When I was running Universal, they came to me and said, will you do an internship program? And I said, yeah, but let's do it in a way that's kind of interesting. They said, well, we're going to open it up and have international students. And so I was literally, and it applies to Ron, actually, weirdly, this story. So Florian, who's taller than me, he's huge, he's like 6'8", is my intern. And he comes in and he's sweet. And
how did it feel?
I know, exactly. I was like, man, sit down, bend down. But he was so curious and so interested in everything. He'd say, can I go watch dailies? And what's a script you're going to make? And I read it. I loved his curiosity, because that's the good thing of those internships. You have a treasure trove of information. And he would always come in, and and he would come in so much that, like, at one point, and I'm not kidding, he came in and sat down, and I'm running the studio, and he comes in and he goes, I watched the dailies on this film, and I'm just curious, why would they do the crane shot on scene 26 and blah? And I'm like, Florence, I have Ron Howard in the lobby that I have to meet with right now on a movie. Like, we can't do this right now. But he was so engaged, I was like, I gotta talk to you later. And then he gave me his short film, which was quite good. And I was like, that's, fantastic, good luck. And he went home. And maybe 4 years later, I was then a producer. And I started hearing about this movie. And it was Lives of Others. And everyone was talking about it in the Academy season and everything. And everyone's talking about this guy. And I thought, this can only be the same guy. There's no way that there's two Florian von Donner's marks, right? And I walk into the Tower Bar at one of those, like, Academy Golden Globe kind of eventy parties where all the celebrities are and everything. And there he is across the room with, like, Tom Cruise talking to him. And I see him and other studio execs and producers kind of jockeying for him, because it's an incredible film. If you haven't seen it, it is truly a spectacular film. And he and I are tall. And he goes, Scots! And I'm like, Florian, and we come, and all these people are like, how in the hell do you know this guy? And it was just such a great thing, and I was so proud of him. But it is really like, that to me is our opportunity. Give artists like that the chance to do what they do great in their own language.
It's really
tell these
exciting.
Great stories.
It's really inspiring. I was actually at an event. Reed Hastings spoke. There was a sort of a question that he answered. Maybe you could go a little bit further, and it had to do with looking for ways to compensate beyond the initial deal with talent. And are you willing to share anything there?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I really love too is I want, and we know that producerially, like, you want to be fair. Like, I just want fair. Like, it's a very unfair business at times, and I believe in fair and righteous behavior. And one of the things I love so much about the company is that's the way they're built with artists. So when we make deals, we're slightly different. We have a model, which so we will, if we make a film, we pay in success. So we find someone's deal, and if they have cash break zero back end or whatever, we try to articulate what we, together with their attorneys and stuff, assume the great success ratio of that movie is. So if we make a movie for 60 and it made 200, we pay people under the auspices of that's what your deal would be. And what we never want to be is a place where people feel like they got taken advantage of. So what he's saying is, if we make something, we pre-negotiated your deal for the totality of it, and it goes even higher, we want to make sure we take care of you, right? Because the whole business is talent, and you need talent to feel great, spiritually about the process, and financially about the respect of getting what you deserve.
And how do you know it's higher? How do you?
We have a little machine in the back corner that no one's allowed to know. We do, I was saying to Ron, we do, on the film side, we do talk to the filmmakers about everything. So every Monday after opening weekend, we give them the opening weekend numbers. Then about 7 days later, we give the week numbers, and then at 28 days, we give the month numbers, and then, then you can call it anytime. We can tell you everything.
And there's
from
something like a break-even line or something that means.
Yeah, it's it's funny. My friends who run other studios always ask me, aren't you lucky you don't have tracking anymore, and you don't have all those things that you deal with on opening weekend? And I'm like, but we do. We just have it internally, right? So I see it all and have the same anxieties and the same worries, and text my guys Friday night and say, how we doing, and all the things that you do at Universal or Warner Brothers. Well,
I have a question for you. Where, again, given the range of your experience, if you were producing today, had not taken the Netflix job, but somehow miraculously knew everything that you know, what would your strategy be about given all the platforms and all the studios and what's out there, financing possibilities? What would your strategy be?
I think it is. I talked to a lot of my producer friends about it. It is a very imbalanced time because there's such a great shift going over. But once again, I think you have to look at that opportunistically. And so there's an enormous amount of buyers, and probably more than I've ever seen in my career. And so you have to be way more nimble and less rigid, right? So for people like us, right, our business models were always, where's my TV deal and where's my film deal? Right? And for many years, you guys were Fox and television, with us in Universal and film. And now, to me, you have to be thinking, how can I access all these opportunities, right? And not be so rigid and be thinking story first and then form after, right? Because for many years, we would, in the film business, we would get a book that really was 700 pages and we try to jam it into 2 hours, right? And then you go, okay, now you can make it 6 hours, right? And so really follow the narrative form is my advice. Go where the narration, the story tells you, because you can sell that 6-hour mini, and you can sell it with Ron Howard directing now, because he is no longer thinking, well, that's film or TV. He's thinking narrative form. David Fincher can do it. You have all these incredible artists who just want to have the ability to create. And so I would just be nimble and almost have your company set up that way, in essence, or your thought process, the way that you map your day. Where does this narrative form go? Don't try to say, well, I got to go sell this to HBO, or I got to go sell this to Universal. Like, think where the best place to sell it is.
That still gives it still challenges independent producers in terms of development and collecting IP, because the old model is you take something interesting, your studio, your network acquires it for you, and that's that. I'd imagine we had to come up with new ways to control material, to cooperate with writers and so forth. We optioned heavily, as you know, and this just to take a moment, this project that we're doing, this content acceleration writers program, Impact. We're doing our 3rd iteration of it, and for all you producers out there, our pitch day is Tuesday in LA, and so it's like 15 or 20 spec scripts dropping on the market on a given day. You guys have been there.
We've been there a couple times, yes.
What's doing well for you? What kind of movies what's making a difference for you?
I mean, listen, the nice thing is people love movies, right? And I think the important thing for us as a business, and I'm not talking about Netflix, I'm talking about the movie business, which I've been part of for my career and love deeply, is continuing that, right? I think the challenge is as kids, it was the form of entertainment, right? We would all go Friday night, and it was everything. And now the production values of video games and television and the internet and we're a form of entertainment, right? And now whatever you make in the world has to be great, whether it's coffee or a story. Like, everyone knows great now. Yelp, right? Rotten Tomatoes, everything. So you're really competing for people's time. No matter what you're doing, we're all overwhelmed with information and opportunity, and we're all acutely aware of value. So you have to be great, and great is different to everyone too. Right. And so whatever that thing is, if it's a teen romantic comedy, which may not be for everyone, better be great for that audience. If it's a sophisticated art film, it better be great for that audience. So I think probably the most satisfying thing for me is, there was a lot of things that scared me when I took the job. When you take then you're like, okay, now I got to go do it. I knew that I had to make great film. To build a great studio, it had to be great filmmakers. So one of the first things we did was get the Irishman deal done, and that was 2.5 years ago, but there was a lot of complexities, and I knew how important it would be to get Marty for the company and the New York Times story, and for people like yourself, for peers to be like, wow, that's a big shift. And then on, and Paul Greengrass and Alfonso Cuarón were filmmakers that I'd worked with in the past and made movies with at Universal and were friendly with. And they brought me films that on paper are not giant commercial films. It's a black and white Spanish period film with nobody like when you say it out loud, and it is a film about a terrorist attack on an island in Scandinavia. And so those are, but I knew, I could see in their eyes the passion, and I trust them, and they're great filmmakers, and so it was an easy yes to me.
And I will also say they became both, because I know firsthand, great ambassadors for the experience and for Netflix.
Yeah, and it was great, and I love them both as artists, and I know how they're just really, truly incredible men who are just so thoughtful about their art forms. And the most exciting, then you make them and they're good, and you're excited and they're good. But then when you start to get to your point, close to when they come out on Netflix, then you have that anxiety, which is, oh my God, in the theatrical business, these things may not work. Like, you start to go, oh God, well, they worked. What are the audience tastes? And truly, the most satisfying thing for me is both those movies were hits, because it shows that there's audiences out there that want different stories, that want challenging stories, that want these things. And so, from a slate building standpoint, it was so so great and frankly to you in this movie, so easy for me to go, well, here's a great artist, here's a great book, here are two actresses in Glenn Close and Amy Adams who I think are just rock stars, and it was easy because I know it's going to be great and I know that there's an audience for it.
We'll be showing you the movie soon. I'm very proud.
It will be great. You heard it from me.
Following up on that is an audience question that's an important one. How do you feel about the theatrical experience and the way it fits into Netflix, the Netflix culture, and why?
You know, I think it's important, and I love it. I mean, what you have to understand, it's a very complex issue. That's not a Netflix issue. It's it's a business issue, right? And what we're trying to do as a business is, as a theatrical film business, it's become very tight. It's become about giant IP, animation, horror. There's certain kinds of genres that have been squeezed out, right? Because they're more challenging. And if you make a drama and it's not quite what it is, and you're up against a $200 million movie with a bigger marketing campaign, you can suffer very badly in that. And so instead of the rhetoric of us versus them or all these things, we all have to get together and talk about how we widen the funnel. That is the most important thing, is to get different voices a chance, give different storytellers, give different things, give the new people coming in with new vibrant stories, the way that the 90s and the 80s were able in the 70s to bring Spike Lee into this business and create that vibrant voice that's been so prominent for all of us with that film. We have to find that opportunity, right? So that's what we're trying to get to. We were Reed and built this incredible company that was a subscriber-based company that went right there. So it's a different business model. So it's not as if it's one size fits all. But I really believe, and I know the other studios, right? It's a very challenged thing for many of them. And for the mid-sized studios, it's a real struggle to have one size fits all. And I think the only way we get there is through talking through it. But we believe in it. It's why we, this year, opened up to 4 weeks and 5 weeks on these movies. Noah's, Baumbach's movies, almost 6 weeks. So we want to do it. We just want to figure out how to do it right. And the trick is, when you're starting from scratch, which we were, it really is almost impossible to start a theatrical film business from scratch and put 12 or 14 original films into the market against all these titans, right? It really is not a business model that can sustain. So you're saying, okay, how do we build our business model and then evolve it and be smart about it? So I think if everyone would just be calm and talk through it, I think over the next few years as an industry, we'll be able to find the right answer for everyone, including exhibition, filmmakers, studios, everyone, so that we can keep this great narrative like we love it, like keep movies vibrant, keep new artists coming in and being able to be these great artists of the next 20 years, and that's what we really need to do.
Well, I know you're actively growing creative relationships, and not just on the movie side, but through television into the movies, and those relationships are, I think are going to yield a lot in coming forward. Is there a kind of a Blumhouse? Is there a model? I mean, certain projects I know you commit and say we are going to go for a theatrical on this, and are there others where you sort of wait to see and make a decision? And is there a formula for that, or a system, or is it just a judgment call?
Everything's different, right? Like at the end of the day, you have to kind of say, okay, where is the audience for this kind of film, right? And where is it in different audiences come out in different ways, right? And we know that just from the theatrical model of who comes and when and what you could ignite around. So it's not one thing. It's just about when they make sense and don't make sense. We had a film in the spring that John Lee Hancock made called The Highwaymen, which I thought was terrific. And he's, thank you for clapping. But he's an old friend, and he'd carried that script for 12 years to the point that at one point he had Redford and Newman. Yeah. That's how long he'd tried to get that movie made. And I knew when I started, he was someone I reached out to. I think he's a great artist. And I knew at times he had talked to Kevin Costner about it, who I love and think is one of the great movie stars. And then we were lucky enough to get Woody to give that balance. And it was like, all right, let's put this in theaters for 4 weeks and give it that ramp. And then on Netflix, it was a giant hit. And so, everything is unique. And I wanted people to have the chance to see John Schwartzman's cinematography up there on that screen and have that opportunity as a consumer to have that choice, right? To be like, I can see it here or I can see it here. And it was a great experience with all of them.
Maybe you can have retroactive sort of festivals where occasionally you bring them back out and give people a chance.
We will. I mean, listen, we're excited this week. We were able to work with the Paris and be able to, bring that, back this week and put Noah Baumbach's film in the Paris. So it's screening there right now. So please go there and buy a ticket. But it is there, and it's a great thing, right? It is a great thing I grew up coming to New York when I worked at Universal, and the Paris was such the Ziegfeld. These were great places that I experienced such great cinema. So I'm thrilled that we're back in over there, and I stopped by last night, and it was really fun.
It was great to see it on the marquee. 1 minute and 20 seconds left. Question from the audience. If we logged into your Netflix account, what would be the most embarrassing / surprising thing we'd find in your queue?
I appreciate that. Well, it'd be weird because I like a lot, and I like dogs. I have 3 kids, so you'd probably find some weird, troll hunters, and you'd be like, why does this guy have troll hunters on his queue? I have You. I don't know if any of you have seen You, which is really good, this Greg Berlanti show. It's terrific. Pim Badgley's terrific in it. So my wife and I got obsessed on that. But it's pretty eclectic. I don't think we have a couple of the cooking shows, right, like everyone else does. But hopefully nothing too crazily embarrassing.
My wife has the Andy Griffith Show on there. Well, this is great. Great to talk to you. Great to have a chance to get some of these questions answered, and you've been very forthcoming. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for doing it. Thank you, Debbie. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wow. Thank you. Go ahead, guys. I'll get you off stage. What a great way to start off the conference, huh? I want just a couple personal notes. You have a masterful director here, being very respectful of the producing process and asking extremely insightful questions. And we asked him, please ask questions that our audience producers want to know and how to approach someone like Scott Stuber. And he did that. He did a great job of doing that. And I also want to tell you, I went to Scott over 18 months ago after he started at Netflix saying, please come to the PGA. Please come to the Produce by Conference. West Coast, East Coast, or I'll do anything in between, even Atlanta. I would love you to speak to our producers. They're dying to know, how do you approach Netflix? What is Netflix about? What are the ways in? And he said, I'll do it. This is like almost 2 years ago. I'll do it. But I don't know what I'm doing yet. I need some time. Let me wait. I says, absolutely, whatever you want to do. And then he called up and said, okay, I'm ready. It was a year later, but he said, yeah, I'm ready. I'll do it. He's a man of his word. So I want to tell you, this guy's a member of the Guild, has been a member of the Guild for years, and he's respectful of producing. And that's how he's running Netflix. So I wanted to share that. It's also the perfect segue into what I'm really up here for, is to thank, again, a sponsor, an honest sponsor, someone who's really honestly supported producing for the last several years, has been a major sponsor of this Guild. It's a big company, but General Motors has been extremely good to producers, and they are very, very adept at trying to include you into, or help themselves to include and give money to producers, support their projects. So they are the official automotive partner of this conference, and they certainly help make this day possible. But they really can help your productions, guys. If you have any questions about it, I'll be here all day. Ask me, ask Susan, my partner. By the way, I left out the fact that in case you don't know, I'm Vance Van Petten. I'm National Executive Director of the Guild with Susan. So please ask me how we can help you get to know how General Motors can actually help your productions. They are really willing and able for any of the brand integration needs for your productions. Now we're going to take a short 15-minute break. This is the Guild. We're going to try to stay on time because we are a Guild of Producers. So we hope to stick to that. Now, guys, as your executive director, take this time. Don't just get coffee. Go up to someone you don't know and say, hey, I am whoever. Vance told me to say hello to you. Why? Because this is a networking opportunity. Next 15 minutes, you make at least 2 new contacts, okay? And every time you have a break, do the same thing, okay? Enjoy yourself. Get to know each other. We're a family of producers. I'll see you back in a little while. Go to Tinker Auditorium. And then we'll begin our masterclass series. Thank you.
Welcome back, everyone. Let's please take our seats. My name is Bruce Cohen, and I'm thrilled to be kicking off the Masterclass individual film section of today's conference. This is the 4th year that Produced by New York has done the master classes, but we do have an entirely new format this year, as I think most of you all know, which is that we're going to be looking at individual films one session at a time. We have 8 films today for you, 6 narrative and 2 documentary. The narrative films were curated by myself and fellow co-chairs of today, Lisa Cortez and Donna Gelati. And yes, bravo to them. They are both moderating panels later today, so you will see both of them. And we have a fantastic kickoff to get the film section started. And it is now my great pleasure to introduce 2 extraordinary humans who I'm really, really excited we have with us here today. The producer of Little Women, Amy Pascal, and the writer-director, Greta Gerwig. Hello, Amy and Greta.
Hello.
So, the Little Woman opens Christmas Day. Do we know how many theaters yet?
Over 3,000.
Over 3,000 theaters. It's one of our jobs today is to make sure that each and every one of them is packed with enthusiasm and excitement. But the film is really just completed recently and has barely started to screen. So I just wanted to see, I'm pretty sure I know that the answer is very few, but how many people in here have seen Little Women? Okay, so there are a couple. So, so we want to sort of, we'll try and toe that line of not complete spoiler alerts as we go. Okay. And so I'm going to be, I want to mitigate the over-expectation for people from my personal standpoint, but I cannot help but tell all of you that I am obsessed with this film. I found it to be one of the most exciting, joyous, thrilling experiences in the cinema that I've had in a long time, and I've continued to get more excited about it vis-a-vis everything that's all of this discussion now about the future of film and with Mr. Scorsese's op-ed. And, you know, he's asking the question, is there a place for non-Marvel, non-comic book cinema? And I'm screaming, Little Women, Little Women!
I'm actually very happy for Marvel Cinema myself, however.
Yes, absolutely.
As the producer of Spider-Man,
As the Academy Award-winning producer of the animated version. Let me start, Amy, with you. This is, I believe, the 7th retelling of Little Women as a film. Do we know, is that a record?
Probably Hamlet's been done more.
Okay, second then.
But it has been done for the BBC many times. It has been made into a Japanese anime several times. It's been done as a opera in Mexico. It is a timeless story, and of course, one of the only stories for a very long time ever about young girls becoming women. We have Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer, and we have Holden Caulfield, and we have a lot of boys. It is one of the only stories that is about a young woman becoming. And I think that's probably why it's been told so many times and so many different ways.
And this is your second adaptation, correct? Because you were involved. What was your involvement in the 1994 version?
I was the studio executive who was
inside cat.
Yeah, I was the inside cat. Now I'm the alley cat. I heard what he said. I'm going to use that. Yes, it was a completely different experience, of course, as you all know, being an actual producer on a movie rather than being the studio, because you're involved in everything, and everything that you think you're involved in as a studio executive, which of course you don't know anything about what's really going on the film, You actually find out how to make a movie when you're there every day. And it's a very different experience. And I will say that, it was 25 years later, and we were thinking that it was probably time to look at this material again. And Greta Gerwig came barreling in, having not made Lady Bird, I don't even think she'd written Lady Bird, and she said to Denise Denovi and Robin Swicord and me and the studio, I'm gonna make this movie for you guys, and I'm really the only one who could do it, and I have a very particular way that I wanna direct the movie, and I'll write the script for you, and here it is. And we were like, okay, whatever you say.
So that is a perfect transition to Greta. So one of the goals of today's discussions, we're really looking at collaboration, because as we all know, as producers, that's really at the core of what we do, is that we're in charge of the collaboration that has to come together to get a film successfully on the screen. And the movies that we're talking to today are all films that are entering award season, so they're all examples of films that have successfully made it to the screen. And so in the collaboration vein, you are both the writer and the director, so we'll have some nice conversations with yourself here for a few minutes. And I really want to focus on the director side, but I do want to start with the writer side, because as in many cases that process comes first. Need a script to direct. And another element of today is that we have taken some audience questions that people have submitted in advance. So at different points during the conversations, the moderator may choose to ask them. And I got two questions, or versions of what I was going to ask anyway, so that's great. So the first one is, Little Women has been adapted many times, as we've heard. Did you find it difficult to give this adaptation your own voice? And did you use other adaptations as a reference point?
Hello? Am I? Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Thank you for saying those nice things. Thank you, Amy, for hiring me. Well, I mean, I grew up with this book. I love this book. Jo March was my North Star. She was my character that I loved. But when I reread the book as an adult, and I'd read it over and over and over again as a child, but as an adult, all of these things jumped out at me that I'd never seen before, and the book felt so incredibly modern and incredibly pressing. And then I had heard they were interested in making it again, and that's why I told my agent, I was like, you have to get me in there. And he was like, I mean, you're not, nobody's asking for you. And I was like, well, they would be if they knew what was in my head. And so for me, it wasn't something I was tasked with and then had to figure out. I had this idea, and for me, because I direct the things I write. So writing and directing, to me, I'm always thinking about the way it's gonna, what are the cuts, what are the moments when I write. So the writing and the directing and everything went all together. I instantly heard everything, like all the girls speaking very quickly and over each other, that I wanted it to be cacophonous. I didn't want it to be polite. I wanted it to feel like life. I wanted it to feel like actual sisters. I don't know how many of you have spent time with 4 sisters, but it's really loud. It's loud and it's messy. Everybody's got all these feelings, and there's joy and there's anger and there's jealousy and there's ambition. And so that was kind of, this liveliness was jumping out at me. And then I wanted to start the film when they were adults, because I felt like that was what was so resonant with me, because I was reading it as an adult. And then childhood was this thing that you were yearning for, this sort of snow globe of an experience. And I felt like it was a way to align the audience and the women with what they want, which is saying those women, the grown-up girls, want to go back to childhood, and so does the audience. And that was kind of the way I was thinking about it. And then also there were just all these themes that felt so modern to me, like there's a line that Amy has in the book. She says, "The world is hard on ambitious girls." And I was like, the world's still hard on ambitious girls. And it felt like the whole thing was about ambition, money, art, women. How far can you get on the little bit of space that the world has given you? And I felt like we could just give all of that space. And Amy was... I feel like instantly she understood what I was saying, which I was so grateful for. And I think that's really at the core of any collaboration, is that feeling that you're speaking the same language instantly. And when I said all of this, and I was like very excited, and I was like, oh, and this thing, and that thing. And she was nodding, and she was like, I know what you mean, and let's do this. And that was like 4 years ago. It's been taking a long time.
I'm going to say something about what you said and all those op-eds about film and Marvel things, because I am very grateful for Spider-Man, but I'm also very grateful for Greta and Little Women. One of the lines in the book and the movie that you haven't seen yet, but you will, is when Amy says to Joe that making stories about things confers importance on them. And I feel like that is actually what Greta was doing in the movie. When she came to us, she said, I want to make an epic about women. I want to shoot it on film. I want to cast it big. I want it to be on a big landscape. I want to make a story about girls that is a big movie. I don't want to relegate it to the small, right? And I think that her desire to do that, and what Amy says in the movie and what Louisa May Alcott was doing all came together. And I think that was really important.
There's another, in the New York Times profile from you on the last weekend, you mentioned another line from the book about being angry every day that you felt so contemporary, as if it was written today.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many of you are familiar with this source material, but the character of Marmee, the mother, this matriarch who's this beacon of goodness. There's a line in the book where she says, I'm angry almost every single day of my life. And when I read it again, I was like, wait, what? Marmee's angry almost every single day? And there was so much spikiness and so much more messiness than I felt had really been explored. And I felt like it's right there. I'm not making it up. I'm uncovering it in a way. And there's just a million lines like that. Amy saying, I want to be great or nothing, as a 21-year-old woman, as an artist. And I felt like there was just so much that could be brought to light about it. And then, I mean, I will say about the fact that it has been adapted so many times, there's the heart of the story that resonates with so many people, of family and sisterhood and love, and, life is too short to be angry at one's sister. It's like that kind of familial thing at its heart, and that, in a fun way, for me as a director and as a writer, allowed me to play, because it's this very famous iconography that then I can do something else with. If you know, it's like we have a shared memory of what we think Little Women is, and then I get to deliver that, and then I get to subvert it.
So, speaking of your direction, I had a question that I wanted to ask, and then someone from the audience gave a very similar version, whose also name was Bruce, coincidentally. So I want to read Bruce's question, then I want to reframe it, though, for you a little bit. He's saying, do you consider yourself to be an auteur? And if so, how would you characterize your cinematic signature? But so I'm not going to make you answer that.
Don't make her answer.
What I'm gonna talk about, though, and want to hear your thoughts on is that A word did pop into mind for me, though, because from the very first frame of the film through the very last, you feel that you are in such the sure hand of an artist who has a vision. And as far as collaboration goes, it cuts across every aspect of the film. It's in the performances and the costumes and the production design and the lighting and the music and all of it, the script. So I sensed, although it only made me all the more excited, but a tremendous vision and a tremendous amount of preparation. That stuff that does not happen by accident. So I wanted to sort of hear from you, what was the process once you have the vision of the text? How did you get it on the screen, and how did you convey to everyone else on the film, which you so clearly did, what this project is that you are all working together on?
Thank you. Thank you. That's very, it's, I mean, I can't speak to the auteur thing. That's terrifying. But in terms of what the film is, I mean, what Amy was speaking to is exactly right. The sort of size of it, that I wanted it to feel like it was taking up a lot of space. And it was taking up a lot of space in the way that, to be perfectly honest, we would give boys stories, and we have. And I was like, but this is these women's story of the Civil War or of the 1860s. And if it was a male story, I don't think we'd question it. I think we'd allow it to spread out. So that was sort of like the basis, that I wanted it to be both intimate and huge. And then, I mean, when I started working on it, it's funny because you have like specific prep, when you're actually all there and you're doing it. But I started it months before and started gathering all this information and all this research and spending time up at the American Wing at the Met and sort of collecting all of this stuff that I knew I was going to ask all of the department heads and everyone to start creating this world that was both a dance and a painting, and I needed it both to happen. So I started with all this information that I had, and then starting to bring everyone into that research and bring Jacqueline Duran, who did the costumes. I started going over to London and all of the costumes that were made there, and we spent just days together poring over artifacts, looking at stuff. And then the same thing happened with me and Jess Goncher, who was the production designer, just driving around Massachusetts, where we were so lucky to shoot in the place where the book was written. And with York Lasso, my cinematographer, and I was showing him all these paintings, and he was telling me, problem with paintings are they are not photographs. And I was like, well, no, I know, but can we get this lighting, but then also have it move and make it seem like I can't tell how expensive the lighting kit was. I don't want to feel the heaviness. I wanted it to feel light on its feet. And so we were having all these discussions, and then Amy, as my producer, who was with me almost every single day, and it's weird when we don't talk, the best collaborator is both contributing and also constantly reminding you what your watchword is, what your vision is. It's big, it's modern, it's fresh, it moves, it's intellectual, it's emotional, it's cubist, it's intuitive. Like, just keep hammering me, and like every time I would think, oh no, this isn't gonna work, she would bolster me and say, no, we can do this, we can do that, and always finding the path to something that was, to be honest, incredibly difficult.
Well, and incredibly elusive, because Greta made this Bible that everybody referred to. The production designer, the costume designer, everybody. And it was, everything from like Amelia Earhart's hairdo and David Bowie's album cover, to really period appropriate buttons. So it was such a specific vision that no one else in the world could have come up with. And she brought everybody with her. But it was from the very beginning something that was very much Greta's vision for the movie.
The Bible thing, I will say, helped. That I went through every single scene, shot listed it with York, did my drawings. But then having every single reference I could think of for every single scene. So it was like a giant 800-page, it would be a photograph that I liked. It would be a feeling. I would describe feelings. Sometimes I would put another writer's, like a poem or something. Like, it was a lot of information, but it was like every single thing that I had in my head that I wanted to include was in there, and then everyone had it. And actually, Amy went through it recently, and it's extraordinary how much of it actually got in the movie.
Frame by frame, frankly.
It's always it's a 1 in 10,000 miracle when a film comes together so beautifully, where you feel it's like a perfect thing from beginning to end because it knows what it is. And the mystery is always, how did that happen? And when you were listing those words that Amy was reminding you of, it just gave me chills as a producer, because I was like, yes, that's what it is. So yes, congratulations to you two. Let's have a huge hand for Amy Pascal and Greta Gerwig. Raise your hand if you promise to go see Little Women. Thank you very much. You will not be disappointed. And now I'd like to introduce the moderator of our next session, Ann Hubble.
Thank you.
Hi, guys. Hi, I'm Ann Hubble. I'm so glad to be here. Please join me in welcoming members of the creative team behind Ford v. Ferrari, director and producer James Mangold, editor Michael McCusker, and actor Tracy Letts. Hi. Good morning, everybody. So it's my great pleasure to be here with you guys. Thank you so much for joining us. And congratulations on the movie. It's really thrilling. I want to ask some producerial questions first about getting the movie made, the process of it, how you went about doing that, and then also some very specific technical questions that maybe you and your editor can speak to. So Jim, you want to tell us a little bit how this came about?
It was a project that had several false starts or starts and then didn't get made, that I had been tracking since 2010, 2011. And I kept going to Fox and saying, I'd read an earlier script and I said, I want to do this. I have ideas on how to do this. And it was always engaged with a different team. And then I went and made 2 Wolverine movies, in between each, coming back. After Logan, I came back and said, I still want to try this. And it was suddenly possible. What had essentially happened was 2 incarnations of 2 attempts to produce it. As I understand it, had mainly failed for the reason we almost did, which is just that the cost. I mean, just the cost of a movie like this, married to the fact that it's an original film. The cost of the mounting the cars and recreating the period grandstands and setting and shooting in different countries was exorbitant, and that's hard for a studio anymore to justify on a movie aimed at adults who don't go to the movies in the same numbers that 13-year-olds do. So, and I was clear I wasn't interested in kind of aiming the movie toward that target. The whole appeal to me, I'm not a motorsports fan, by the way. The appeal to me was these great characters in the movie. The muscle of the cars, the beauty of the cars was really interesting to me, and also even in a way trying to unpack why I didn't like racing, meaning using the movie as a way to kind of going, what am I locked out of when I watch it on television that makes me so bored, and that became a kind of challenge for us to solve. How can I open that up and invite an audience and myself into the product, because it must be more interesting than I think it is. And but that was the nut we cracked, was essentially first just the work that Jez, John Henry, and I did on the script to get it to a point where we could get it. The studio wanted it way, like 75 was what the goal was, and no one had gotten below 150 million. And we didn't succeed at getting to 75, but we got, at 90 is the final budget of the movie, but we got close enough that they, as is often the case, they're like, fuck it, do it, you know. And
Well, it's remarkable that it was only $90 million, but it's
and the success
really
of
like
Logan
what you
was a
accomplished.
big help, meaning that little bit of wind blowing on our backs that we had made. Mike also edited that film. That the whole team had essentially made a movie that had cost far less than any other superhero movie anyway, and it grossed the studio a lot of money. It was a big help.
So we were talking earlier about the editing process, and you mentioned that you came on a couple months in advance to do pre-visualization, which really helped in choreographing the races. Can you just speak a little bit about that process?
Well, in order to do this, you have to coordinate. Obviously, many of you know there's a huge amount of planning required in terms of how to do this. It was my goal to do it as real as possible, meaning avoiding visual effects predominantly for the cars. I felt like not just in the creation of the cars. In any case, you'd have real cars on set, but also for the actors in the cars, developing ways we could shoot the actors in the cars, not in green screen situations, which, as many of you know, it kind of isn't just that it's hard to pull off the visual effect. That technology's gotten better and better, but it also takes, green screen stuff takes a huge toll on the quality of the acting. The actors are looking at tennis balls on C-stands. The wind is coming from someone with a leaf blower aimed at them. It's you can be a world-class actor and still dealing with that is nonetheless dancing on hot coals and trying to find a scene with all that happening. And so that was a big goal. And so a lot of planning was required. Also, none of these tracks exist anymore. For instance, even in Le Mans, we went to France, for those of you who saw the film, to shoot them in the village of Le Mans, but we couldn't shoot the track because it looks nothing like it did in the 60s. The charm of the track, part of what really intrigued me, was this idea of that it's 8 miles of country road and rough and ungraded and without railing, and the grandstands are kind of more primitive and charming. So we essentially built the grandstand and starting line in California, and we found locations in Georgia for all the signature turns and straightaways of the track. And then the goal was to figure out, and this leads to the previs and all the planning, is how we're going to suture all that together. And Mike came on early with our previs team to just begin to plan how you're going to make every time a car in our film does a lap around Le Mans, it's traveling through 6 disparate locations, so that light matching, dirt level on cars matching, rain, wet down matching, obviously position of the cars, speed of the cars, all of that had to be carried and processed through all these multiple locations.
I would also say that it's not just technical development. We were really trying to find story because we wanted the racing to have story throughout. So being on early in previs allowed us to figure out where the story might be flat and inject some plot. And I think that really helped. We really had to nail that scene down to do that. So.
Yeah, I think it's remarkable to have the amount of tension in a car in a close-up with one character that you guys were able to do for those scenes.
Well, a lot of people, when they say, as we've been doing our press in the movie, when people ask about the action, in a sense, I think we did our very best, and I'm thrilled that people like it. But I do think that the missing ingredient so often in action pictures is actually not the quality of the action or the kind of muscularity or visual spectacle of it. It's that you don't give a shit about the characters. And so you're having just kind of a sensory overload. You're getting bludgeoned with money essentially. But you don't care. And I have very specifically, Logan was even a response to this in terms of superhero movies. I actually want to fall asleep when movies like that are playing. I mean, the sound and everything coming at me, and I don't give a shit, and I almost have a spontaneous catatonic response to the movie. And I desperately want to avoid having that response to my own film, so I'm focused on trying to find the people, even in the action, following the same adage in a musical. You know, the song should feature character and character development, not just everything comes to a stop.
Well, speaking of characters, Tracy, you get to play Henry Ford II, or the Deuce. You said you didn't do a ton of research, but can you talk a little bit about your process?
I didn't do a ton of research. It wasn't necessary. I mean, the dramaturgy was on the page. Jim was very upfront about saying it's not a documentary. Henry Ford II is not so present in the public imagination that we carry around what he looks like or sounded like. It's not like playing Elvis or somebody like that, right? So there wasn't a lot of research required. I read a couple of books, not very helpful. I watched some YouTube videos, not very helpful. I watched what I needed to watch, but you know, the analog nature of this is really important because so I'm getting ready to play this guy who's a captain of industry, and I get a period suit, and it's the right suit, and it's tailored impeccably, and I get a fantastic haircut, and I walk onto the set, and it's done, and the set is spectacular. The first thing I shot was in the office, and the office was so grand, personal, particular, heavily researched, period. And you walk on and you go, oh, I don't have to do anything. I don't have to act powerful. It's all here. It's all here in the costume and the haircut and this amazing set. It's like it's all done for me. I can just sit in a chair and I'm the most powerful guy in the room. So that applied as well, the racing stuff. You know, you go to the track and you're not watching tennis balls, as Jim said. You're watching cars racing around a track, and you can smell the gasoline and you can hear the roar of the engines, and you're seeing actual drivers and actual cars. To provide those circumstances means, as an actor, I get to pretend with authority, which is what we all need to be able to do. And so it just makes my job so much easier. I can just focus on playing a scene, the stakes of the scene, what the character needs, what he's willing to do to get it, those kinds of things. And I don't have to muscle anything, I don't have to put anything on my shoulders, it's just all there for me.
And so you're also a writer, and you read the script. Did you have any notes or anything going in?
I did not. I don't tend to approach it like a writer. I hope I interrogate it like an actor.
You put one word in Ford's speech, I remember that, but it was normal. Any actor might have done.
Again, it wasn't like a writer going in and saying, oh, let me tell you what's wrong with this. It's more like an actor trying to make the scene work, and all actors do. We get on the set and we talk about how to make the scene work. With a well-written script, it doesn't require a lot of rewriting. Hopefully you're not doing a lot of rewriting or improvising on the set, because the script is solid when you step on the set. But so no, I hope I don't look at it. I certainly didn't have any notes for Jim before we started. I don't recall that being part of the conversation.
You're good. Wonderful.
Well, the script is tight.
Yeah.
So one of the things I wanted to discuss was the movie is very much this kind of, as we were talking, art versus commerce, and the times that we're living in is an us versus them period. And so I wondered if you could speak a bit about how you think that changes any interpretation, or what themes you wanted to put out there.
It was very much how I responded to the story to begin with, which was this you know, the title is a little deceptive, probably intentionally so, in the sense of promising a kind of corporate war. But the movie is essentially, I mean, if anything, it should be called Ford versus Ford, because it's about Ford trying to catch up with a kind of perfection of Ferrari and hiring this band of kind of misfits and experts to help them get there, because they can't do it on their own, and they're ill-equipped to do it on their own. And this unique relationship between essentially a bunch of kind of car artists and a kind of 60s Mad Men style boardroom of corporate creatures led by Tracy, and that all of whom are united by a desire to win, but all of whom have different ways to get there, and understanding decision making and instinct and how you process decisions. And that whole thing was extremely, I mean, inviting for me, because I live it. You know, I mean, I have very expensive ideas, and I bring them to corporate groups and say, please pay for these ideas. And they say, why? And why should we trust that you're going to pull this off? And if I succeed at pulling off, I'm a hero. But if I fail, the drivers may die, I just disappear. You know, I don't get to go to the office anymore. And the essential kind of art commerce battle, and the battle between kind of using last year's thinking to understand next year's, which is very much in the movie, using last year's kind of theories about cars for what was a kind of new kind of car being developed that was breaking the rules of what had existed previously. All of that was extremely analogous to my own life and struggles as a film artist.
Right, and I think the camaraderie, I mean, we've worked together for a long time, and the team that he has assembled has worked together for a long time. So I mean, I think they're just kind of poured into just the DNA of the movie.
Yeah, if you asked me in one word what the movie's about, I wouldn't say cars, I'd say friendship.
Absolutely.
I'd say that the movie is completely about the kinds of friendships that we get less and less of these days as we all sit and communicate at terminals and on phones. The friendships you make that also I get to experience with guys like these and all the wonderful people I work with on movies, which is that we struggle through late nights and oppressively hot days and impossible hours and sleeplessness making these movies, and you never forget those crazy days. And you can not see each other for 5 or 7 or 10 years. And you know, I just ran into Woods. We were doing this tour. I ran into Joaquin coming back from Venice, and it's like I hadn't seen him probably for 8 years. And it's like I saw him yesterday. Meaning that I made a movie called Walk the Line with him, and the way you get bonded by these experiences is a kind of lifelong effort you go through together, and that very much these characters in this film share.
Right. Well, their lives are dependent on each other.
That's right. Their lives are in each other's hands, and in a less literal way, that's true here for me. Yes.
Yeah.
Professional lives.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have a question from the audience that I want to make sure that I ask. Hold on, let me find it. Wait, those are not my questions. Those are the last questions.
Little Women
It's
question.
a Little Women question I want to ask.
Why don't we mix them up?
Can you talk a little bit about no? Were there any political challenges telling this story whereby Ferrari was resistant to looking weaker against Ford?
Did the person who wrote the question see the movie?
I don't know.
I don't think Ferrari looks weaker. That would be the first thing. But it wasn't made with corporate cooperation, meaning this movie wasn't made like a industrial film with the blessings of the companies. They were all terrified of what we were going to do, and good, because no one's a hero in that sense. I mean, they are characters in the film. The companies have flaws. The characters have flaws. I don't think this is some kind of rah-rah go forward movie. If you see it, you might, from some of the Disney marketing, feel it is, but the film is not that. And the reality for me was that if I had a hero in the movie, it would be Enzo. I mean, he represents, for all of us film artists in the car world, he's the guy who's making perfection that no one can afford. He's like Zoetrope. He's Francis. He's going bankrupt making his dreams, and he doesn't give a shit if anyone buys them. And they're completely unaffordable to anybody, and he doesn't give a shit. and that there's a part of that that is kind of pure artist and completely unknowable, and part of the beautiful tension I think we have in the movie for characters like Henry Ford, who is a legacy, who's taken over his company, who has to run a company that makes money, who makes cars, economical, sensible cars for working people that they can afford. And so the tension between these two companies, one that is incredibly successful, Ford, but lacks any cool, and one that is nothing but cool and going bankrupt, is a really interesting art commerce dialogue laid into the world of cars.
Yeah, the Enzo character and Christian Bale's character in many ways are very much of this cut from the same cloth, I think.
Yeah, Enzo
Yeah.
and Christian's character,
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
Yeah. And in terms of, and I do think that the Ford character kind of like has a moment where he finds that remembrance of why he was doing this, or how his father came to what his dream was as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well,
scene?
just that all that Jim says about the corporate culture is true, but one of the beautiful things about the movie is that you recognize the personal stakes that all of the people have in this race. And it would be so easy to just make Henry Ford II the suit and the haircut, that was all there was to him. But the truth is, I can't imagine what it felt like to be the grandson of Henry Ford, who's not only an intrinsic part of automobile culture, I mean, American history. And to have that name emblazoned on every car that rolls off the line, and to feel like you have a responsibility, the weight of legacy on somebody like that. So that I think it's one of the things the movie does so beautifully, that all the principal actors have different things invested in the outcome. I mean, it's what separates a genre movie. It's a sports movie. It falls within that genre, and it hits all those points. But the fact is, you understand the personal stakes all of the people have involved in the outcome. And so that's what makes it good.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that you're kind of like looking through the action to find what's happening to the character, I think is really what makes the movie work so well.
I hope so.
I think that's actually one of the trickier parts about cutting the movie, was figuring out how much of that we had to lay out at the top end before we got to the excitement, sexy car stuff. And I think we did a pretty good job, because by the time we get there, as Tracy said, you're so invested with everybody else's story that it kind of just takes off naturally.
I also think that and it was what I was after, my first movie was a intimate upstate drama called Heavy, thank you.
That's the guy who saw it.
That's the one that, it did very well, Tracy.
I saw it.
It ran at Film Forum for weeks. Yeah, there you go. But what I was going to say is that what I come from, I still bring. Meaning, my love is making scenes with actors, and that. I mean, I love the muscular side of filmmaking as well, but there's a muscularity to beautiful, intimate work too, and that, not a muscularity, but a delicacy and an artistry, and that so often we just associate cinema with rapid cutting or no cutting, the oneer, or like showy. Everything's about putting it in your face and going, look, I'm making this movie. There are filmmakers here making obvious creative choices. Part of what I love is trying to bring you into a very intimate space with actors, and where the special effect is, how did they capture that moment? It's indescribable. It's kind of unscriptable. How did they find that? How did they dig that out? And that my greatest joy in a movie like this, for those that see it, is that while it possesses all that energy and dynamism of the action, it also has scenes that would remind you of Heavy. That there are scenes that are father-son scenes, character scenes between Matt and Christian, where it is not what you'd see in any action film you'd normally be watching from Hollywood, where it's a completely different, intimate, dramatic energy, and I think makes the action, of course, twice as propulsive, because the movie has both personalities braided together.
I think you totally accomplished that in this movie.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to thank you guys all for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
The moderator for the next session is Frida Torres Blanco, and she'll be right up.
Good morning, everybody. I'm very happy to introduce today the director and the producer from Honey Boy, the director Alma Harriet and Daniela Taplin-Lundberg, the producer. Please give them a clap.
Hey.
Hello. Today is a very special day for me because when I watched the movie, I was completely blown away. That didn't feel like an opera prima work. It feels like a really mature, solid movie. And I was like, who's these people? I was like completely surprised. I never like to read anything about the movie. I like to have a very fresh experience. And I was wondering to ask Alma, did you feel that your work in the documentary world, was helping you to craft such a realistic and solid movie and these characters?
Well, first of all, thanks for having us, and it's such an honor to speak to you. And Y Tu Mama Tambien is one of my favorite films ever. It has very much influenced me, so thank you for doing this with us. Yeah, I think that definitely the documentary, the work that I've been doing, not only influenced it, it informed it, I guess you could say, and the kind of documentary filmmaking that I've been doing on Bombay Beach and Love True has never been the very kind of orthodox journalistic approach to documentary, but much more about how can we visually capture, but also I guess emotionally capture not just like the cold facts, but the subconscious of the characters, their dreams, who they are, the textures of what makes them who they are. So I think my documentaries always dealt with that kind of blurring the line, as they say, but I very much, tried to not look at my work in any kind of genre, definition. And I think this one is also, in many ways, not really a normal, drama or just a biopic. It really comes a lot from the work we've done also on Love True, which was my documentary that Shia LaBeouf himself executive produced and financed, and had a lot of techniques like psychodrama, where people acted their own memories and their traumas with actors that played their younger selves, which is really what he's doing here. He's kind of entering his own memories of his trauma and getting to play them out as his father with somebody that's playing his younger self. So it's very much informed everything that I did in this film.
So I want to ask you something that, you already answered a lot of things that I was very curious, but who was the idea, for Shia to play the father? That role that he wrote based on his own experience with his own dad.
Yeah, so Shia got arrested in 2017 and got court-ordered to go to a mental health/rehab facility where he got sobered up but also diagnosed with PTSD and was instructed to go into exposure therapy. And as part of that therapy, you kind of do a role play of your memories and your trauma, and he would record that and then transcribe it and send me, pages of that. That was really, I think, some of the best scenes in the film that are the heart of the film were already there as is, to his credit, and it was just like an incredible script when you read it, and I thought that if he could play his father, that it would make it so much more interesting, both from a cinematic perspective and a therapeutic perspective.
Well, this is a big question for Daniela. Daniela, I'm a big fan, obviously, of your work. Because,
I'm a fan of your work.
I think you're incredibly brave. You know what? You're taking a lot of, risk. So if I will read this script, I will tell you, wow, I loved it. I'm incredibly moved by it, but I think it will be a very challenging movie to be financed. How do you put this together?
I had met, actually, when I got the script, my friend Mark Inkner gave it to me and said, this is going to be really challenging, but it's a really special piece of writing, and Alma's going to direct it. I had met with her a year before and connected with her in a way and was a huge fan of her work, but she had also handed me something she had written. And even though she was a documentary filmmaker, in reading her work, I understood that she understood narrative arc, and she understood how to conceive of a film that felt like a real film. So when I read the script, it was some of the most authentic and inventive dialogue that I had ever
read. I mean, it felt like it was real, and I think it was. A lot of that was real. And so, you know, it was a script not many people wanted to finance because of Shaya's history. And of course, Alma, you know, was a documentary filmmaker, but to me that was less of an issue. I had real confidence in her. She had a lot of qualities that I recognize in other filmmakers that I really love and have worked with. She shares some things with Cary Fukunaga, who I'd done Beasts of No Nation with. So the real question was Shia and whether he was going to be able to show up for work. So I said to Alma and Brian Kavanaugh-Jones and Chris Leggett, I said, I have to sit with everyone and we have to sit in a room and look each other in the eye. And if I believe that Shia is going to show up, I'm going to do this. And we're going to be shooting in 3 months and I'm going to commit to finding the money. So we all went to LA. Shia shows up and like cut off shorts and croquis and was very nervous coming into the room. And then he told the story that Alma just told. And he said, I promise you I'm going to show up for this. If you make this movie, it's going to save my life. And we all just started crying. I mean, in the room we were crying, and I believed him. So in the room, we all committed to each other, and 3.5 months later, we were shooting.
Well, I would say bravo, because it's brilliant what you guys did. I was wondering to ask you, so when I was watching the movie, I didn't feel actually for moments that I was watching the work from people. I was feeling that I was part of that movement, and I was like sitting in this AAA or NA meetings, you know, where people get completely naked. Did you guys have the experience to go to those meetings?
You mean in real life, if
Yeah,
we've
the
experienced?
two of you?
Well, I'm sober and I'm Al-Anon.
For research, you went there?
I have. All the people that were, you mean in the set that were filmed, yeah, a lot of them were from meetings and people that I know that are in anonymous programs, but some of them were just like, you know, it's kind of crazy because sometimes you cast people because of their faces. And then as a child of an alcoholic, I think I have obviously an attraction to working with people that have endured some kind of trauma or have dealt with addiction. It's funny because there's one of the people there, a guy named Carlos, who plays Shaya's sponsor. Kind of, you know, he doesn't talk, but he's just like the guy that he's his sponsor, and he indicates it's him. It was somebody that in a location scout we saw him, and he was actually a janitor of sorts, or somebody that took care of some security. I'm not really sure. At this other location we scouted, and I said, oh, we have to have this guy play the sponsor. And then he came in, and it turned out that he was 13 years sober and was really, you know, somebody that him and Shia connected immediately and kind of really worked it out. So it's really like a lot of it is intuitive, but yeah, there was just like as much as they say, real people in the film, which I don't like because I, first of all, believe that actors are real people too. And so because I feel that people that are not actors are actually great performers. But the woman that plays the pimp of Twigs, who's called Mama DJ in the film, she was actually from an organization we worked with together, a few of the women in the film who were you know, working in the sex trafficking industry, or she was actually a pimp recruiter and has now been, you know, kind of rehabilitated. So she came in and really helped us make it real, you know.
To Alma's credit, and also this puts tremendous stress on producers, but she would never compromise on the casting. And I think everyone's performance in this film is one of its like great assets. And, you know, Mama DJ was one of those examples where she just was like, we need to find the perfect person for this. You can't just compromise or hire someone, you know, who's come in and hasn't experienced this. And so, you know, a lot of the roles were really not cast until the day before they shot, and because of Alma's sort of desire to really create that sort of authentic feeling for Otis.
So how did you manage, Alma, not to be sentimental and just to be sentimental? Because my feeling was like, wow, this is the integrity of the piece. You know, all the characters is such a deep emotional roller coaster. So how you were like able to balance it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was just, I would say that this whole film has been a little bit like breathing in pain and breathing out love, you know, and just sort of being able to have intimacy with the people you work with and make it a safe space for Shia, who is only now learning and understanding where some of his behaviors that are more aggressive are coming from, because he's now diagnosed with PTSD. So knowing how to kind of handle situations that have been triggering to him, and then turning them around, you know, with the help of the right kind of safety net that we have managed to have because of everybody around in the film, including the cast, and even little Noah Jupe, who was 12 at the time, and his mother, and everybody just kind of coming together 2 months earlier and starting to work on the film a lot sooner than usual, and rehearsing a lot, but also just spending a lot of time together, from like them going to baseball games and playing cards, and Noah and his mom living in Shia's house while Shia was at the motel, and all of us just with Lucas kind of really connecting. So when we entered the set, there was just a lot of trust to be intimate and to be compassionate towards what's happening, because it was not a normal, you know, kind of set. But then at the same time also just keeping that, you know, sort of, you know, I guess director hat and producer hat at all times, and just managing to shift between them all day long. And it was really, we shot this film in like 19 days. So there were just so many incredibly challenging decisions that we all had to decide on really quick a lot of times. And I definitely am somebody that always pushes to do more and to try new things and to take risks. And I was just very, very lucky to have Daniela, who was an incredible producer, alongside our other producers, Chris Leggett and Brian Kavanagh-Jones and Anita Gao and Fred Berger. But really Daniela's ability as the financier of this film to support me, I just felt so supported and so understood at every turn. From the production to deciding to, in the edit, flip the whole film and reconstruct it from linear to going back and forth in time, you know, something that a lot of producers maybe would have been kind of a little scared by, trying to get to Sundance in time and sell an independent film like this. So we just had the right support system, I think, for everybody.
Just two things to
Please,
say that. The first is, Alma really does think like a producer, and I think she is a producer. She's come from that world, and this is the first feature she's produced, but she's produced everything.
I produced my 2 other documentaries prior to that, so that was really like also very challenging stuff to do.
So every discussion was a discussion. Here's why we're going to need 2 cameras instead of 1. You know, Shia is like lightning in a bottle. We need to be able to capture Noah while he's reacting to this, because if we don't, it'll be tougher to cut. And I think when 2 filmmakers both think creatively, but are also aware of the budget together, it makes those discussions so much easier. So that was such a tremendous asset. The other part of this is I really do feel that Shia was going through therapy as he was making the film. I mean, that is part of his process. He wrote it, but then he had to act it out. So I remember one day on set, he said, this is scary for me because I'm having to let go of my anger and my pain, and I'm afraid I'm not going to be as good, because that is literally a line from the film. So it was all so meta and intense, and I think Alma's ability to just like maintain calm and like a overall vision was the only thing that allowed us to get through to the other side, and also make what I consider to be a masterpiece. No, I mean, it's my movie too, but it's her movie.
Well, there's a movie of, you know what, this is something that I want to say. I mean, obviously Alma is crazy talented, but it's also you, because, you know, this is a team effort. Every single movie is a bunch of people hoping to give the best, and hoping that people will connect with that. And when sometimes there are miracles, and miracles happen like this movie. I want to ask you something. You said 19 days of shooting. So that feels, when you watch the movie and you feel like it's like 32 days. So did you give her, Daniela, time to have rehearsals? Because when I saw Noah, I was like, who is this creature? I mean, what is this? This is a grown-up. This is not a little kid. So they were having a lot of time to do rehearsals, leave the camera rolling, and improvise, or no?
That's her process, and you know, very rarely on a truly independent film do you have that. But Noah, Shia, and Lucas all just showed up as if this was the most important film they had ever done, and I think for them it was, or it seemed like it. And so, you know, Lucas didn't have to show up 5 weeks early and get in shape and practice Shia's mannerisms, and Noah and Shia basically lived together, right, for weeks and
well,
weeks.
Shia moved to a motel because he wanted to be more, you know, in character as his father. And then Noah and his mom lived in his house, and Lucas would come there often to take Shia's clothes, which he was wearing constantly, and like, was literally wearing his clothes for 2 months. And then he was also sort of, you know, gaining weight and exercising. And then they would all, Shia and Noah spent every day together, really rehearsing and just doing a lot of things together, like learning how to juggle and like just becoming really close. And Lucas and Shia and me would rehearse. And what I also did was have Lucas and Noah work together, because I really wanted them to bring this character to life together and, you know, work on body movements and all sorts of mannerism. And they both had a coach that worked on their dialect together. So that, a lot of like the nuances of them actually feeling like Otis together, even though that they not necessarily look alike or something like that, I think came from that quality.
Now that you're mentioning the body gesticulation, there was one moment in the movie that they're like in a motorbike and you're feeling so, I mean, I was so scared about this two that they were there in the highway thinking, oh my God, they're gonna survive or not. And there is one moment that the boy is putting his head into the shoulder of the dad and he's moving his shoulder and is saying everything. That little second, it said so much about the characters. I mean, it's like super beautiful. Yeah. I want to ask you something. So normally we're playing, I mean, as a people, and this is like because this is a very therapeutical, you know, exercise, I think for the audience, because it's such an intelligent movie, you catch yourself playing your dad, or you're catching yourself playing your mother. I mean, there was, and this is a question for the public, it was scary for you at some point, Salma, to have your writer there and the actor and playing all of this at the same time together?
I wouldn't say it was scary, because I just love Shia so much and find him to be one of the most challenging, you know, artists to wrestle with, and as a result of that, get to interesting places. But it was definitely intense and definitely exhausting at times, but also extremely rewarding. And I think that we just had such an incredible way of working on this film all together, and we've been extremely passionate about it, and producing it was such a challenge. And we're actually so happy to be here today and even be talking about it, because actually when we submitted all of our producing credits, I have to say that we were 5 producers, 3 men and 3 women. I guess 2 men and 3 women. And only the men got the credit, the PGA credit. So we had to submit a letter and really explain from start to finish everything that we did that should credit us as producers. And we were so extremely passionate about doing that and getting credited as producers, because the work that we've done here and the safety that we created, that you're talking about, for nobody to feel scared, but everybody to feel part of a creative process, came from the fact that we produced it the way we did. So we're very proud to be here today and be called producers with all of you. And I hope we can make more movies together where we could create environments that feel safe to explore and be creative and try new things and really play with the medium and the genre and the expectations of audiences of cinema.
Well, obviously you guys have been earned this title for a long, long time. I mean, it's such a shame that we're not recognized, and sometimes it takes years and years and years, you know, to put your credit on the first line and not at the end, because it's not considered okay. So we're women, and I want to say something that, you know, Alma have created this unbelievable space for women called Free the Work. I think everybody should go and take a look, because it's a way to find talent. And it's over there. You just need to click. Please go today and take a look. I want to say one more thing. Don't miss this movie. Email everybody. Tell them you need to watch it, because I think a lot of lives are going to be saved after this movie. Thank you so much.
Lovely. Thank you so much.
Frida.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
just want to introduce, this is our last speaker of the day, which is going to be the moderator, who's going to do the final masterclass session of the morning, is Marilyn Ness. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. Please join me in welcoming the creative collaborators from the documentary film One Child Nation, director, producer, cinematographer, and editor Nanfu Wang, director and producer Xiaoling Zhang, and producer Julie Goldman. Thank you for joining us. So, Nanfu had made a previous film, Hooligan Sparrow, also set in China, also questioning of Chinese policies, which really put you under a spotlight for China. And so, given that you were on the radar, I'm wondering, in what way did that reshape how you thought about approaching One Child Nation, which would bring you back to China?
I think this is going to be so different from the previous panels because we're a documentary and we filmed in China. I was born and raised in China, and after I made the first film, it was really uncertain, which during that film, the Chinese national security agents interrogated me for 5 hours, and eventually I lied to them and came to the US and put the secret recorded video of their interrogation in the film as the opening. So after that, I wasn't sure if I would be able to go back to China anymore. So when I was thinking about the one-child policy film, after almost a little bit over 2 years after my first film, that was when I thought maybe I would never even be able to enter the country, or if I returned, they allowed me in, but secretly followed me, and the moment I show up, the government would arrest me or the film subjects. And that was when I reached out to my great friend, Jialin, and we met at NYU where we went to graduate school together, and I asked if she would be willing to co-direct and produce it with me, and she said yes.
Yeah, sure. And because in China, like one of the issues we deal with is the surveillance and all kind of facial recognition system. And in China, if you buy the phone and if you check in hotel, everything is linked to your personal ID card. So having Nanfu, like we are never sure that if she's on the government's watching list, and if she's on the list, like even if she take a train, and every step is kind of a risk for us. So we have to prepare everything very carefully. For example, she almost never check into a hotel unless she really have to.
By the way, eventually I did go back to China, and that's what we were talking about. Once I was in China, what we did.
But also, you had a protection, which is that you had done a film in between about an American homeless, mentally ill person. And so that was actually like a positive because it was a critique of American society. So that possibly
That's when the Chinese government invited me to show my second film. They were like, we want to interview you to talk about what America was like. I was like, okay.
Yeah. So there was it required a lot of coordination and collaboration to figure out how to get both of you in and out of China safely. And so I'm wondering, Julie, like maybe on the US side, what were some of the things you put in place that then you guys were doing in China?
Sure. I mean, Jialin really was, when Nanfu was filming, then Jialin was tracking, and you could talk about that, maybe just the tracking on the GPS and then reporting to us, who were like sitting in New York, incredibly nervous and anxious the entire time until you hit the soil here. But do you want to talk about how you were tracking Nanfu? And then I'll talk.
Yeah, so we try, every time we minimize the crew number in China, because if the two of us go together, there would be too much attention. And then whenever Nanfu goes, I check her on GPS. I know every hour where she will be, and if she stay in one place for too long, then I will get nervous. And then we'll just, for example, but I cannot really test her or anything because if she got into trouble, her phone will be confiscated. So we just have to wait for her to get back to us. And then we have emergency plan. If she disappears for a few hours, we'll reach for contact on the ground. If she disappeared for 1 day, we'll reach the activist lawyer, and then if she disappeared for 2 days, our producers will reach out to all the campaign groups here. So we have an emergency plans, yeah.
A lot of them, yeah. And then, as John was saying, so we were funded by organizations like Sundance Documentary Fund and Chicken and Egg and other organizations that have a lot of planning and structure and help for situations like this. There's been given a lot of thought with documentaries about shooting in unsafe zones. So that was one thing, and also we had coordinated, we had certain contacts with the government and with, through like New York, head of the city council, senators, like that kind of thing, so that we knew if the alert came, we had a system that was going to start to go out very quickly.
Did it ever get that close? Was there like a moment with a hand on a button for you?
There was one moment that was really, really scary. So during the entire production, as Charlie mentioned, that I tried to never take trains or flight or anything that would register my ID and alert the government. The strategy is to go film, and before the government already realized we were filming, we are already out of it. And there was one time that I had to take a train to follow a human trafficker from one province to another province. It was a 12-hour train ride. And that was the only time, or the first time, that I had to buy a train ticket. And as soon as I got on the train, the officer came and started questioning, why are you here? What's your relationship with this guy? Show me your ID. What are you doing? Where are you going? And soon I got very nervous, and I knew that I couldn't stay for the entire trip. So as soon as the train pulled to the next station, I quickly jumped off, but I didn't realize it was 1 a.m. and it was complete dark. The train stopped in the middle of nowhere. It was completely in the woods. So it was freaking out, but because we had done so much precautions, and Jialin was in Massachusetts at the time, and there was a time difference, but what we had done is, for that trip, we hired a private driver from another province to come there. We couldn't hire a local driver because the local driver might report to the police because they know something. So we need to hire somebody who has no connection to the story. And so a driver was driving along the railroad, and basically the same route in case anything like that was going to happen, and then the driver would pick me up if I got off the train. But because I got off so soon, it was way earlier than any of us had expected. So that whole night, it was a nightmare, literally and metaphorically.
Yeah. Okay, well, you made it, so that's encouraging. But so I do wonder how, what happens with insurance, and what happens with funders who don't want to take on risky projects? How do you build a functioning, responsible production around this kind of?
Sure. I mean, I think, well, first of all, the insurance wouldn't cover us in China. So there was no insurance per se that would cover that risk. Especially with Nanfu's history. I mean, when we saw Hooligan Sparrow, I was like, oh my God, I mean, you have to see that film. You're just watching her navigate this unbelievable, fraught, dangerous situation. So because of that, we knew especially it was going to be very hard to get anything to cover that. So we did have, as I said, a group of organizations. We went out and we got grants first, and then we pitched the film at IDFA, the Amsterdam Documentary Festival, which has a big pitching forum, the original pitching forum. And we had a co-producer who was on already, Christoph Jorg, and we started to get funders from Europe. And we had BBC, ultimately, the BBC, WDR, Arte in Germany, France. We had a number of Scandinavian broadcasters and Dutch broadcaster. And then we also were able to get ITVS and Independent Lens, PBS, the funding arm of ITVS, and Independent Lens, which is a strand, a series that's on PBS. So that, and plus the grants that we got from a number of organizations, and one equity funder for the final money, that was it. And everybody was quite aware of the risks. We raised the money, and we were able to finish the film in time to premiere in Sundance, which was kind of wonderful. We ended up winning the grand jury prize, which was great.
Much deserved, yeah.
But there we thought, okay, well, we would love to have a theatrical and streaming and other rights, but we knew that there were certain, some of the bigger distributors were going to have issues taking on a film that was critical of contemporary China. So when Amazon came and said, we really want to do this film, we are all in, we were kind of surprised and thrilled that they were willing to do that because it was pretty gutsy. And that also allowed us to have a theatrical release, and we're now on Amazon Prime as of this week, and then we're going to be on PBS. So they worked with all of these carve-outs, which is another miracle that I'll still never understand. But yeah, so that was kind of how we navigated the whole run.
And so I'm curious, actually, in terms of all that distribution, it's a personal film. Your family appears in it. People really go out on a limb and share their experiences of helping support the one-child policy, much to some folks' regret. And I'm just curious, like, how do you protect, when we're looking at an international landscape like this, how do you protect the subjects in your film? I mean, will the film be seen in China? One imagines where there's a will, there's a way. So how do you account for that?
We are pretty sure that the film would not be shown officially in China anytime soon. Talking about like the grand jury prize at Sundance, there was a funny story behind it, because the day we won the award, Chinese news reports also reported on Sundance Festival, because it's one of the top festivals in the US. So they announced the list of awards winner, best narrative, best editing, and best cinematography. Among the list of a dozen films, One Child Nation was the only one that's missing. So they made an effort to take that one out. So we knew that the film was censored, and we knew that they would do anything to try to silence, make sure that the film's information is not seen by people. But now the film is on Amazon Prime. I'm pretty sure that it wouldn't take long for the Chinese people to find a way to see it, and we are so good at piracy. And
in this case, we encourage piracy in China. But that happened with Hooligan Sparrow.
Yes, with that film, I actually actively helped to make sure that activists, people who are interested in the film, have a way of seeing it, even from me. In terms of the people who are in the film, from my previous experience, I realized that a lot of them, so first of all, they really target other people who made it, who has opinion. And second of all, if people who have seen the film, you can realize that most of the people in the film, except for 3 people, who is a journalist who is in exile in Hong Kong, a couple who lives in Utah, and an artist who is like a dissident artist, everyone else supported the policy. They were conflicted, they were painful, but eventually they all said, the policy is a great policy, and that's a huge part of the film too. We explored why people still, after suffer so much, they still believe the policy was good, how the propaganda worked in China and changed people's thinking, through the messages indoctrination. And so the government could look at the film, and in fact, a lot of the people who are in the film signed a release after we made the film, and we showed them and asked them to sign. And they all said, yeah, this is so true. This is exactly what it is. None of what they said is a secret or is subversive to the government.
Right.
Yeah. It's the editorial, and you put it together, then presented the opinion.
I'm glad to hear, because I know some of them are your family, too. So we do have an audience question. One result of the one-child policy is that it changed the role of girls and women in Chinese society and provided new opportunities in education and work. And so as filmmakers, have you benefited from the policy? Why or why not?
I could tell if that question must have come from a Chinese person, because I got that a lot. Every time when we were screening and then we see a Chinese person raise their hand, and we often think, oh, because we get at the two ends of the spectrum. One end, people will say, thank you so much for making this film. It recorded our history, and I never knew this. I'm learning this. On the other end, a lot of people was like, well, but the one-child policy really helped, our economic progress, and we benefit from it. So we got a lot from that, and that's one of those. I would say personally, of course, I didn't benefit from the policy. I dropped out of school when I was 16 and started working because my family couldn't, and they didn't think that a girl should have an education, and they couldn't afford either. For a lot of girls who are the only child of their family, they thought, yes, because of the one-child policy, they were able to get education and have the resources their family have. I often would ask people themselves who ask that question, when you get married or are thinking about having children, would you want your government to monitor you when you could have a child and how many children you could have? And go check, which is true in China, the local authority would come and check after, monitor, taking notes of when you have your period and are you pregnant, and after you're pregnant, even within a week, taken to be sterilized, was something that the person want. If not, then I think the answer is pretty clear.
Right. So I know this is actually a very, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, Nanfu said it all.
Yes, okay. But I know actually for both of you, this was a personal film. I read that you both grew up sort of accepting the propaganda that came with the one-child policy and sort of hadn't reflected on all the ways in which you swallowed some things that were pretty upsetting, controversial. And so I'm curious how, as a team, because it's a very intimate film, but yet it had to resonate for American audiences, international audiences, European audiences. And so I'm curious how, as a creative collaboration, you found a path to making something incredibly intimate that also touches any viewer, I think, wherever they come from.
Okay. I think the story, the entry point is me becoming a mother and suddenly started question all the things that I was taught in China, which was a lot of indoctrination that made me think the one-child policy was the best when I grew up. And suddenly I realized it shouldn't be, or there are a lot of questions. But when we were making, Jialin and I were both born in the 1980s. We're a similar age. We all grew up under the one-child policy. And even though it's similarly through my personal story, but it's really my story, her story, and our generation's story. It's like the story of this generation who were born and grew up during that past 35 years.
Yeah, so I also, because both of us have siblings and we grew up in China, and so I grew up in China, I feel like a lot of shaming from the culture for having my siblings. People would think you're from the countryside, your parents are feudal-minded. So all these things we find it very, although we grow in different part of China, I grow in a more industrial part, but still it's the same, and the strong preference of sons over daughters. I think these things are all universal also here. It's not maybe other countries they don't have one-child policy, but these are the feelings that we feel that can resonate through different people from different cultures as well.
Yeah, and I mean, for us, it was this is about the right to control your body and reproductive choice and women controlling their own choices regardless. And that is something that we're dealing with here in this country and in many other places now that absolutely resonates. It's the same issue.
I'm curious though if some of the revelation of how much they kind of swallow, how the policy had seeped into their essence, if that was discovered in the process of the creation of the film.
I mean, there was a lot of discovery that went on during the film, and also for us, it's okay, so it was really fascinating. So the shame that you have to be a sibling in China, and the judgment of if you're in a rural area or if you're in an urban area. I mean, I think for us it was it was really fascinating to watch their revelations, and I think it was surprising to both of you.
Yeah, totally. You know, when you live in a place where there is propaganda, sometimes you don't realize it until much later. The thoughts, your thoughts might not be original yours. There was always a moment you can trace back and to realize where it come from. And for me, it was almost like a therapy session. Like suddenly, one night I was thinking, wait, when I was in middle school, I would go to school and to meet other people who are coming from the one-child family, and I had a younger brother, and I was always be embarrassed and ashamed, and I would try to hide that fact that I had a sibling, because the entire country made it like if you have a sibling, then you are selfish, you're backwards, you're uneducated. So we both, like, our families paid fines and from places, and then we end up having a sibling, but it was abnormal, and we felt it was almost immoral in a way. And now, like, looking back, like, why did I feel that shame? Why should I? Yeah.
Yeah, it is a really beautiful film, a challenging film, and I think highlights the ways in which it's important to take stock and reflect back to a culture. So if we can, I think we're out of time, but please join me in thanking Nan-Fu, Xiaoling.
Thank you. Thank you.
And it's on Amazon Prime.
If you want to relive any of today, which you probably want to hear some of the things again, it's going to live on our YouTube channel, the Producers Guild YouTube channel, soon. Some pieces of it you should just be in the moment and enjoy now, like what I'm about to say, because it's probably not going to make the cut. If you weren't here this morning, I remain Kay Rothman, chair of PGA East with Bill Horberg, and we are now going to talk about one of my favorite subjects, which is lunch. It is thank you. Could we hear it for lunch? Good. So it's a walk-away lunch, and you should have in your conference materials various suggestions. We need you to take your things out of the theater. We're going to close the theater during lunch. It's a union thing. And then you'll come back in after lunch. You need to be back in your seats at 2 o'clock sharp so we can continue with the exciting day. Let me just make sure. Yes, I covered it all. Bon appetit.